Azure API Management, API Creation, Publishing, and Versioning. API creation is the first step in making your services available through Azure API Management. It involves defining the API schema, endpoints, and functionality. API schema. The API schema serves as the blueprint for your API, defining its structure, data models, and operations. It provides a clear and standardized way for developers and applications to interact with your API. Key elements of the API schema. Data models. Specify the data structures used in your API, such as request and response objects. These models describe the format of data sent to and received from the API. Operations. Define the API's operations or methods. For example, in a RESTful API, these correspond to HTTP methods like GET, POST, PUT, and DELETE. Parameters. Define parameters that can be included in API requests, such as query parameters, path parameters, and headers. Endpoints. Endpoints represent the specific locations or URLs where clients can access different parts of your API. They act as entry points for different operations. Types of endpoints. Base URL. The base URL is the root location for your API, and all other endpoints are relative to this base URL. Resource endpoints. These are URLs that correspond to specific resources or objects your API deals with. For example, /products could be a resource endpoint for an e-commerce API. Operation endpoints. These URLs correspond to specific API operations or methods. For example, /product/it could be an operation endpoint for retrieving a product by its ID. Functionality. Functionality describes what your API does, which is a combination of the operations it supports and how they manipulate data or perform tasks. Key aspects of API functionality. Data retrieval. APIs often provide endpoints and operations for retrieving data. For instance, a GET operation on /products might retrieve a list of products. Data modification. APIs can allow data modification through operations like POST, CREATE, PUT, UPDATE, and DELETE, remove. Business logic. Many APIs implement business logic by processing data, applying rules, and returning results based on certain criteria. API schema, endpoints, and functionality in practice. For example, in an e-commerce API, you might have the following components. API schema. This includes data models for products, orders, and users, with operations like get/products, post/orders, and put/user/it. Endpoints. The base URL could be https://api.example.com, with resource endpoints like /products and operation endpoints like /products/id for retrieving specific products. Functionality. The API retrieves product information, allows users to place orders, and updates user profiles, implementing the e-commerce logic. How to create an API. Importing an open API specification. You can import an existing API definition in the form of an open API specification, formerly known as Swagger, SOAP WSDL, or other formats. Manual configuration. Alternatively, you can define the API manually by specifying its endpoints, operations, request/response models, and other details. Publishing APIs in Azure API Management. After creating an API, you need to publish it to make it accessible to external clients. Publishing options. Staging and production. Azure API Management allows you to manage two environments, staging and production. You can test changes in the staging environment before promoting them to production. Mock API. You can use a mock API to create a sandbox for developers to test their applications against the API even before it's connected to a real backend. Versioning APIs in Azure API management. Versioning is crucial to maintain backward compatibility while introducing changes to an API. How to version an API? Azure API management enables you to create multiple versions of an API. Each version can have its own configuration and behavior. You can specify the version in the API's URL or use custom headers for versioning. Making use of these features. API creation. Start by defining your API, whether it's RESTful using OpenAPI or SOAP-based using WSDL. You can also create entirely custom APIs manually. Publishing. Choose the appropriate environment for publishing, and consider using a mock API for testing. Azure API management acts as a gateway, routing requests to your backend services. Versioning. When making changes to your API, create new versions to ensure existing clients remain unaffected. Developers can specify the version they want to use in their requests. Summary. API creation involves defining the API schema and endpoints. Publishing APIs makes them accessible to external clients, with options for staging, production, and mocking. Versioning is essential to maintain backward compatibility when changes are introduced. To make use of these features, create your API, choose the publishing environment, and carefully manage API versions to serve various client needs. Thanks for watching.